for other participants to join in, but good morning from Midtown Cleveland. Thanks for joining us virtually on here at our offices in the Agora on Euclid Avenue. I'm Richard Barga, Vice President of Economic Development for Midtown Cleveland, and this is our fourth installment of Innovation Intersections, a series designed to quote unquote demystify the term innovation and invite our community to explore how we can intersect with these new and disruptive technologies. Today, we're going to be hearing from David Sylvan, President of UH Ventures, about bringing the gaps of healthcare product development. A special thanks to our partners listed here who have helped market and provide content for our upcoming events. So let me give a quick run through of the program before we get started. After some brief introductions, we're going to be having a fireside chat with David and our host, Tegan, followed by some time for question and answer. But please feel free to pop questions in the chat as we go forward. So for those who may be joining us for the first time, why are we launching this series? The strategy to establish the health tech corridor along Euclid Avenue has resulted in substantial reinvestment, focusing on tech and innovative growth on the RTA bus line. And over the last 10 years, we've seen in reverse decades of demolition and disinvestment. And while efforts are underway to build upon these investments, East 66th Street has emerged as an important asset-rich north-south connection as well. And planning efforts are currently underway to create an inclusive community-based streetscape to connect Midtown and the Huff community. This will all culminate in Midtown's Innovation District, a place designed to foster intentional intersections between community residents, nonprofits, and entrepreneurs, catalyzing economic growth and creating economic opportunity for all. This is our last virtual innovation intersection. We will be holding these sessions in person starting in July. So please stay tuned as we're hoping to get the details out for our first in-person event. Let me now turn it over to the host of our series, Tegan Horton. Known as the Tegan, Tegan is a storyteller translating knowledge through data, marketing, and technology. Currently, she is a podcaster and tech innovation strategist. Tegan, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Rick, for that introduction. And hey, everyone, we are back for the fourth conversation of Midtown Cleveland's Innovation Intersection series. Today, I have the pleasure of hosting David Sylvan. In his role as president of UH Ventures, David has a portfolio of responsibilities, including core operations, industry partnerships, technology transfer, commercialization, business development, and strategic initiatives. He collaborates with UH leaders to accelerate system growth through new business endeavors and expansion of existing programs. His work also includes the identification and evaluation of new opportunities through acquisition, investment, joint ventures, and other arrangements. David comes to UH Ventures after a successful 15-year career in capital markets, where he led a derivatives trading and public finance investment banking platform. Prior to this, David spent 8 years at the sports marketing giant IMG. In addition to various board and advisory roles, David serves as interim CEO and board member for a New York-based fintech startup, Paradigm, an automated OTC trading platform for digital assets. David is an adjunct professor at Weatherhead Business School Department of Design and Innovation. David received a bachelor's in commerce and business law from the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, South Africa, and an MBA from the Weatherhead School of Management, Case Western Reserve University. David, welcome.
Tegan, thank you for that warm welcome. A pleasure to be here.
Yes, I'm excited to jump into the conversation. And from your background, it's clear you have global experiences For you, how have those experiences influenced your perspectives as an entrepreneur?
So, Tegan, I think we're all functions and products of our environments, and some of those nurture creativity and resilience, the figure it out notion. Some environments are already sophisticated and evolved. Resources are readily available with possibly a willing and able ecosystem, and then of course there are the variants in between. For me, Africa, resource rich, perennially underestimated. It's the underdog can-do persona, perhaps a little bit like Cleveland as a micro metaphor. Other environments are by their very nature circumstantially myopic. They choose to go it alone. There is the sense that they can solve for all of their own problems unilaterally. So these exposures, South Africa, the UK, Israel, Singapore, they've helped me to understand that my approach, my team's approach to enabling innovation, the manner in which I think about those opportunities where I'm personally involved, they've all taught me to meet the opportunity in a contextually sensitive way, not apply blanket assumptions or a templatized approach, if you will.
Yeah, creative solutions. I love to hear that. As a story translator, I can see how global experiences gathered from around the world can improve your creativity. So I guess curious, do you consider yourself a creative person?
Again, there's a compare contrast. Candidly, I'm not that creative. I'm the fortunate one to be surrounded by the people that bring that type of creative firepower. I think I'm pretty good at contextualizing and understanding a problem. I'm pretty good at the execution upon a design solution. But definitely the strong threshold of the creative spark comes from all around, and it's our role to nurture that, to solicit that, and then to sort of repackage that into something that's utilitarian.
Yes, nurturing your skill sets, and it's great to have that balance, really, of art and science, and having your experience in finance. Really, what inspired you to apply that experience to fintech startups like Paradigm?
Tegan, that's an easy one. Paradigm, it's just very briefly for the audience, it's a New York-based startup. It was spawned here in Cleveland. It's in scale-up mode. It's an institutional over-the-counter trading platform, chatbot-powered, AI automated. And it has created a transparent liquidity and multi-dealer trading environment for crypto derivatives. As I said, the brainchild of a former capital markets colleague of mine here in Cleveland at KeyBank Capital Markets. He's a Case Western Reserve University graduate by the name of Anand Gomez. And he literally solved for a glaring pain point in his then day job as an institutional derivatives trader in the rates and in the commodity space. I won't get into the details, but the market traction and validation is self-evident. For example, we were more than 40% of last Wednesday's global Bitcoin derivatives transactions flow. So some very, very tremendous early success proof points. This is just a long way to say I got involved because of my faith in a founder's ability to execute upon a plan. We'd worked together for years. The magnitude of the unmet need was exploding, and finally, taking the novelty of the underlying technology solution was both defensible, and we're now seeing clearly scalable.
Yes, you mentioned a lot of emerging technologies that are really converging, AI and blockchain, and really applying it to the finance space. I guess having your experience and seeing the development of finance and kind of running into these technologies, what are some of the changes that you've noticed, and how fast is this growth really happening from your opinion?
Well, I think the challenge that some of these nascent technology underpinnings face is they get ahead of the use case. They get ahead of the problem, and so they become solutions chasing problems, and that could be and is sometimes the death knell for some of these platforms. Blockchain's initial emergence was novel. It was exciting. It's complicated. Certainly not understood by many. Not understood by all, and there are pieces and parts that are still purposefully mysterious and are in need of demystification. But when you lead with the notion of the technology and you don't lead with the notion of the solution that you're looking to solve, or the manner in which you're going to meet the unmet need, you put yourself in a position where you become vulnerable. So I think the biggest change is the sort of acknowledgement that there are people and users, and the technology is merely a conduit to a solution for the user, for the people that are impacted.
And it's a beautiful response. Thinking about how this technology isn't known to many, but it's really not known to all because it's ever changing. But then also seeing how new technologies allow us to be more human-centered. And you having perspectives on design and innovation, really would love to hear from you. What is design?
Well, I probably get a lot of flack from my colleagues on this, because if you ask two people, you probably get three opinions. But so certainly design is different things to different folks. For me, it's not the process by which something is made pretty, but the process by which something is made, as I mentioned earlier, conditionally utilitarian. It's the final iteration of the thing, the product, the technology. Is it capable of delivering upon the promise? And that's the basis of design from my perspective. You know, folks tend to think about design from the aesthetic standpoint, or you know, they think of architecture, they think of art. Obviously, critically important and designed by their very nature. But everything is designed. Relationships are designed. Processes are designed. Speech is designed. It's the intentional overlay that influences or informs the endpoint, in my opinion, Tegan.
Yes, and really bringing us to the center of the conversation, healthcare in Cleveland. How can human-centered design help solve health disparities in Cleveland?
Big topic. Human-centered design starts with a clear and comprehensible, I don't think that's a word, but comprehensible understanding of the topic or the opportunity or the challenge at hand from the lens or the perspective of the people directly or tangentially impacted. So to think about how we, the healthcare community at large in the region, looks to continue to design and iterate around some of our most vexing disparity problems, things like access, education, treatment follow-up, medication adherence, food as nutrition, the built environment and its impacts. We have to embed within those affected communities, and human-centered design, Tegan, allows us to, or teaches us how to listen, how to probe, observe, and experiment, all with the person at the core. And I'll give you a quick example. And this is an example of how we've used human-centered design to understand and design for a potential solution. It became clear to us that there still is a glaring disparity in the vaccine experience for our community here in Cleveland. Primarily who was or wasn't willing to receive the COVID vaccine, not necessarily access to jabs, that was being solved for, is being solved for and addressed in a number of parallel processes, primarily by going to the patients versus having them come to us. But we were going to focus on what we needed to understand in terms of what was driving hesitancy and resistance. What were those mental models? And in comes human-centered design. The team started by mapping the pre-vaccine journey, what happens during the vaccine process, and then of course understanding post-journey. And we did this so that we could gather the data needed to inform actions from insights. Some process focuses and some were technology enabled. And I won't walk through the process, but the team led by Kipley and others on our platform did develop various personas that then enabled us to design paths to meeting those personas at the most optimum juncture along their journey. So that's a very recent, tangible example of how human-centered design should be used to understand, the patient who's at the center of the conversation.
Yes, understanding a problem from someone's perspectives, really understanding their feelings. And I think that empathy is a word that isn't used often enough in design.
No. We impose healthcare solutions on people, Tegan. We don't necessarily understand what it is they need and what it is that they want. We prescribe that. I mean, the word in and of itself denotes something that's a little bit aggressive. We prescribe treatments, we prescribe medications, and unfortunately, by definition, we also prescribe the process by which populations at large, communities at large, need to access us, and we need to flip the script on that.
Well, that leads right into my next question. What are the biggest challenges to healthcare in Cleveland, and how does this compare on a global scale?
You're asking all of the billion-dollar questions. Tegan, our challenges are not dissimilar in nature to most large and complex metropolitan areas. There's certainly local and regional idiosyncrasies, but broadly speaking, we need to continue to hammer away at, I'll give you a couple of examples, access and affordability. These are table stakes. Well before we begin to address the nuances of the experience piece of the journey, and we have to do that, our community needs to be able to access quality and situationally relevant healthcare, and in their communities, or to be in a position to get to a facility, navigate the process, navigate the built environment, understand their treatment plan options, all in order to positively impacts and allow us to chip away at the delta in outcomes. And some of these deltas, as you well know, statistically are dramatic and glaring. But this is a topic unto itself. But I will tell you, this is what keeps us, the system, our platform, engaged on a daily basis. This is our mission.
Yes, it can be hazy going through a healthcare process. And so in this theme of demystification, if that is a word, how can we demystify innovation when it comes to healthcare?
Through discipline, I think through processes like human-centered design, through platforms who act as enablement mechanisms and facilitate all of the underpinnings that allow innovation to see the light of day, to come out of the back room and get off the bench and get off the back of the envelope or the back of the napkin. I think that transition from concept and theory to action and product or process, for us at Ventures, and I know for my peers in similar platforms across the city and across the country, it's really that translational gap between theory and tangible outcome is the innovation bridge for us in healthcare.
Mm-hmm. Yes, moving a concept to something that's tangible in the world. I think that many entrepreneurs can resonate with that.
Well, and Tegan, we can build a million things for you that you don't need, but they are really cool. And so we need to stop, getting away from facilitating a lot of resources being plowed into pet projects that don't have a clear outcomes path, and haven't taken the time in their development to understand the the scope of the unmet need, and whether or not, candidly, there is an unmet need, or whether it's just a cool product. And everyone keeps slamming Segway for that, but Segway is one of the poster childs for this type of problem. Incredible technology, simple, elegant, it works. No one needed it, except if you're doing a tour of the Champs-Élysées in Paris, then it becomes pretty valuable.
No, it's interesting you say pet projects. So I think a lot of innovation can get lost when there aren't clear goals or metrics. And in this spirit of demystifying innovation, what outcomes should you be looking for when you're focusing on innovation in healthcare?
Well, there's a patient or provider at the end of any process or opportunity that we look at. There are many ways for us to think about measuring impact or value. ROI is a broad definition, some of which is qualitative, some of which is quantitative. But I think for us, in order to be appropriate partners to our clinicians and appropriate partners to our patients, we have to make sure that the problem that we're looking to solve is one of scale, that we aren't looking to merely address something that will impact a finite subset of either of those two constituencies. So what we look for is the most potential from an impact perspective. And we never lose sight of the fact, people talk about patient first, and that's critical. But the reality is that the delivery modality also needs to be borne in mind. And there's usually, invariably, in one way or another, a clinician or provider who is at the other end of the proverbial table. And we have to bear their experience in mind as well as we look to solve for these problems, and we look to usher these opportunities, to a logical endpoint, to a deployment point.
Beginning with the customer in mind. It's beautiful. So what role does UH Ventures play in Cleveland's entrepreneurial and health ecosystem?
Obviously, we're first and foremost designed to address the needs of our system, but our system by definition then impacts community and impacts populations. And there's a distinct overlap when it comes to populations vis-a-vis our sister organizations and the other healthcare systems, both locally and regionally. So the role we can play is, as we look to solve for problems that impact people, populations, and communities, that raises the tide. So there is a buoying effect for everyone that's associated with that patient population and with our communities. So we understand our swim lane. We're cognizant of the things that from a scope or scale standpoint, we shouldn't, can't, or won't do. So we play to our strengths. The other institutions within the city do exactly the same. Some have broader reaches, some have narrower focuses. But we're all part of this puzzle looking to raise the same tide for our local and regional communities from a healthcare and a healthcare outcomes perspective.
Thank you. I just thought to look at the chat, but anyone that has questions, or if you just want to show us some love, please share your name, what organization you're with, and how you're feeling about this conversation. We'd love to ask some of your questions throughout the conversation as well. But I have more to ask. So what resources does Cleveland have available to lead in healthcare innovation?
We're fortunate in this region. Cleveland tended to, in the past, and I've been here for a while now, apologize for itself. It doesn't need to do that. It shouldn't do that. We have the density and the willingness when it comes to healthcare innovation. We've got the people, we've got the talents, and we've got the money. Now, there needs to be some type of stitching initiative, if you will, to make sure that all of those things align appropriately. You can't throw the wrong people at a lot of money, or a lot of money at the wrong people or resources or technology. So there is more art to that than science. We are formally looking to do this as a region, and I mean by coming together to facilitate healthcare innovation. You might have seen, taken a recent announcement around a state-sponsored initiative known as the Cleveland Innovation District. And this is really the opportunity for the state, for Jobs Ohio specifically, to catalyze the collaboration between the anchor institutions, university hospitals, the Cleveland Clinic, Metro Health, Cleveland State University, Case Western Reserve University, so that we might jointly do something for the betterment of our broader community, and do so using force multiplication, using collaboration in actions and deeds, not just in words, because in healthcare, we're largely looking to solve for the same problems. We need the feedstock of the right workforce, and that's where our educational partners, both from a research as well as a degree and certificate production process, can then help us with the supply, the personnel and the people and the leaders needed to give our outcomes, commercial life. So there is this broad-based initiative. It's just kicked off, began at the beginning of the year, and it has a 10-year horizon to have a material impact, a multi-billion-dollar impact on the region from a healthcare perspective. And that will also obviously impact jobs creation, and the manner in which we as a region can be seen as a viable living lab, if you will, for industry, for company creation, for attraction from the outside in.
Yes, David, you talked about this stitching. So what were some of the challenges to this stitching, I guess, that you're seeing, and how do you see that evolving as the Innovation District takes shape?
I think the primary challenge is this notion that our legacy prohibits forward progress. We have long memories, and we need to stop playing some old tapes. There is new leadership in the city at the institutional level. There's a new willingness at a leadership level for us to dispel some of the old mythology, and to prove to other jurisdictions that, given the density of the resources that we have unilaterally and individually, if we were to bring that together, we can absolutely create the 1 + 1 = 3. So I think it comes down to willingness, and it comes down to the notion that we need to stick to the plan and the process. This is the long game. We can't look for short-term headline success. We actually have to look for tangible outputs and outcomes, and do so together, do so in true collaboration, where it makes sense for us to intersect, and or where it makes sense for us to leverage our individual strengths, for the benefit of the other institutions.
As you talked about playing old tapes, willingness, and sticking to the process. And for me, what I'm hearing is education or learning. And I think you mentioned that earlier as well. How do you see education playing a role in these challenges being conquered as well?
Well, there are many a startup here in town that would say that the two primary reasons they flee to the coasts are, first, access to capital, and or pretty closely aligned with that, access to the human capital resources, the expertise needed to operationalize the concept of the idea. Ironically, solving for the capital piece is easier. We can attract capital into the region if we can prove that we have an attractive and viable collective pipeline from an opportunity perspective. The people piece is a little harder to solve, because we can't do that instantaneously. To attract people from elsewhere to come to Cleveland, to put down roots and to domicile here, little bit more complex, as you can probably appreciate, Tegan. The beach scene here still isn't great, so we have to overcome that as a hurdle. But if the opportunity is right, if the access to capital is right, and the access to the incubation and the acceleration and the mentoring is in place, we do put ourselves in a position where we can more readily attract the people. But from the education perspective, we should also be helping ourselves. And both Cleveland State and CASE are, as are the other educational institutions in the region, focused on retooling and recalibrating in order to churn a higher velocity of graduates with a STEM focus, with a technical focus. And not all of these have to be degree programs, of course. A lot of these are certificate programs, but generate enough of our own feedstock when it comes to the human capital quotient to serve these needs.
Yes, and there are those active in Cleveland really already ready to make these changes or to lead. We have our first question from Rebecca Manning. How does a health tech startup get in touch with hospitals to pilot their programs? What is necessary to get a potential program approved?
Great question, Rebecca. And I promise I didn't send Rebecca a check to ask that question. University Hospitals, as an example, it's the one I represent, has an outward-facing intake portal, intake mechanism. Our website, ventures.uhhospitals.org, has an invention or innovation intake tab where you submit your idea. We literally see, Rebecca, ideas and concepts come to us on a daily basis. The team begins to delve into the concept, the idea, the unmet need, with an immediate lens on what might there already be out there, or how is the problem currently being solved. We get to a decision point pretty quickly, Rebecca, with regard to whether or not there is something viable from a pursuit standpoint. The promise that we do make is we respond to every incoming inquiry. And so very often we revert back to the opportunity initiator to say, have you thought about X, Y, and Z? Or perhaps if you would reframe X, Y, or Z, or D, we can put you into a position where the living lab concept that is University Hospitals could become this pilot or proof of concept mechanism for your opportunity. So we try to take an agnostic lens view when it comes to what we receive, Rebecca. Many of those same opportunities, we also receive, obviously, those opportunities, those invention and innovation disclosures from our own colleagues within the institution. But we act as the central repository and the central vetting platform, filtration platform, to assess the viability of what comes in.
Thank you. And thank you, Rebecca, again for your question. If there are any more questions, feel free to send them in the chat. But on that same vein, what do the portfolio companies for UH Ventures look like?
So from the standpoint of building our portfolio and building our risk portfolio, if you will, we take a very broad view. So we tend not to concentrate only on medical devices or healthcare IT. We are equally interested in those technologies or those opportunities that impact the business mechanism of healthcare, whether that be the likes of supply chain or revenue cycle, et cetera. So although we've only been in the capital deployment phase of the UH's innovation platform's growth for the last couple of years, the 8 or so technologies that we've invested in, the 4 or 5 or 6 companies that we've stood up or spun out, cross that gamut. Where we do differentiate ourselves, Tegan, is that we're also, from a portfolio perspective, responsible for certain core adjacencies to the platform. So operating lines of businesses that we look to continue to optimize, grow, put ourselves in a position where viable, sustainable alternate revenue streams can be generated as a result. So it ranges all the way from existing operating platforms within the healthcare system, the likes of specialty pharmacy or lab services or home care, and we talked about that before the podcast went live, all the way to very early medical device type technologies like urethral stents or like a multi-channel glaucoma device or software technologies that would look to optimize a process or a procedure.
Yes, and you talked a little bit about that proof of concept opportunity that you're really giving to startups. Kind of what does that process look like moving from incubation to acceleration at UH Ventures?
Yeah, for us, the incubation phase is really an understanding of, is there a there there? We are in a position, certainly from the perspective of technologies that come through our own pipes, to actually deploy some resources, to spend some money and some human capital around determining the viability of what's being proposed. There's usually a lot of iteration around that phase and that aspect of the opportunities life cycle. But we would rather spend some money to determine that there might not be something there versus what we and other institutions had ordinarily done historically, and that is continue to pour money into something with the hope that it evolves into something that has the appropriate outcome. So the incubation is really the determination of, is this viable? Should it be built? Is it protectable? Who would want to use? What would a go-to-market and business model look like? How could we price this? And then obviously and critically, what are the incumbents? What does the competitor set look like? And might they be in such a position that they could essentially imply that there isn't enough room for another of this type of solution being offered? Acceleration is obviously the other side of that coin. The determination's already made that the market is there, that the unmet need is well defined, that this is a differentiated opportunity, that there might well be the right people in place from the perspective of operationalizing and executing upon that business plan, that it is in a mode and in a position to receive capital to continue its scale, and that there is there are a set of milestones and measurables that will keep everyone honest along that growth timeline.
Yes, and with growth timelines, metrics may be important. And I know we touched on this earlier, but we have a question from Easter, doctoral student from Case Western. Thank you very much as well for your questions, which is a two-part question. And so I'll give it to you in two pieces. As we are moving more towards the value-based healthcare, what are some of the tangible metrics that UH Ventures considers when evaluating new technologies?
Sure, and it's a great question, and the answer is yes. Everyone is sometimes kicking and screaming, and whether they like it or not, moving from volume to value. And those healthcare systems that haven't already put in place mechanisms by which they're going to facilitate that transition are probably going to end up facing an existential crisis. But the measurements, and I believe you talked about tangible metrics, and the measurements that we would consider when we think about technologies that would play into the volume to value spectrum, if you will. Some are very simply quantifiable. Are we impacting things as like length of stay? Are we impacting things like readmission rates? Are we able to measure and monitor compliance and adherence when it comes to meds? You can imagine, Essa, that there are many more. But if you just think about, for example, those three very distinct line items that usually drive and impact a traditionally razor-thin net margin, those are some of the elements that we need to consider from a metrics perspective when we look at technologies that would help us move towards value.
Thank you. And to go into the second part of the question, keeping cost effectiveness in mind, if the new tech is not as cost effective, but potentially more efficient, then how can, I think they're saying efficacious here as well, then how much of the impact that this new technology needs to provide, what is UH Ventures looking for?
So complex question, Essa, but certainly we work with our clinical partners or the impacted domain from the perspective of the cost component is only one cut that we would take at the consideration when it comes to the assessment of the new technology. There are more expensive solutions that prove better outcomes. We have to keep in mind that there is a patient at the end of the process, and the knock-on impact from a value perspective far outweighs the initial consideration when it came to initial cost. Because remember, if you're getting to a better outcome initially, perhaps more expensively, you are impacting then health considerations, comorbidities, and again, those readmission type implications down the road. So the recoup lens on that, a little bit more nuanced and perhaps a little bit more qualitative than quantitative, but the recoup on doing the right thing for the right reason outweighs the purely linear two-dimensional initial cost component, cost quotient when it comes to a new technology. So all of those elements come into play when we do the compare contrast, the side-by-side comparisons with regard to the introduction of a new product or technology.
Yes, and COVID-19 shook the world, but the healthcare industry was definitely at the heart of that. So how has UH's portfolio really changed from pre to post COVID?
Well, I think in a couple of ways, Tegan. I think the first is that we're now seeing a proliferation of the likes of telehealth and remote patient monitoring technologies. And it's becoming a hackneyed phrase, but everyone's now acknowledging that genie is not going back in the bottle. And so that modality of care delivery is not going to go away. So as a result, you're seeing a dramatic uptick in the number of these types of digital tethering type technologies. And so as a result, our viewfinder, our lens has shifted towards, where the money is going. So we have seen and expect to see that type of impact on our portfolio as a result. So really, what did the epidemic do in terms of the manner in which we deliver healthcare? And then what did that imply in terms of the technologies to facilitate that? That is now being reflected in how it is that we're deploying investment monies.
Yes, and COVID-19 brought out a lot, but I think that mental health is another theme that COVID-19 allowed us to really touch. And so how do you see healthcare and technology converging to impact mental health?
Well, I think you have to start with the fact that, and this is an exploding issue, and our mental health partners have been laser focused on this for a long time, well preceding COVID, of course. But there is a supply component that we need to consider as we think about the technology partnering in this regard. There are not enough mental health providers and workers, and you're seeing people in dire need who are having to wait a long, long time in order to get appointments. So how might technology come into play to address that? Well, we're actually working on a homegrown technology that some of our physicians are proposing that is looking to use artificial intelligence and trained algorithms to, for example, analyze speech acoustics and look at video biomarker data during a natural conversation to determine whether or not there's an indication of depression and anxiety. It's a modality by which we could think about triaging, we could think about referring, and we could think about monitoring, if you will. Now, again, at some point, there needs to be a human being at the other end of that spectrum. But this type of technology, this marriage of AI and clinical need, can help with the pre-screening, can help with the assessing of the acuity from the perspective of this might be an individual where there could be other ways in which we could begin to avail them of assistance without necessarily waiting for that in-person encounter. And it could also be used as a technology to affirm a provider's diagnosis and give some threshold of comfort that there's another proof point that's technology enabled that is, putting the provider in a more comfortable position from a diagnosis perspective. A lot of activity in this space with regard to the marriage of technology and the mental health crisis.
Yes, we actually touched a lot on that AI and really the evolution of technology's ability to increase confidence in healthcare. Last conversation, I don't think that was last week. But yeah, I definitely encourage those listening to really follow the trail of this conversation because we also started with IoT. And I think that there are a lot of things that you're hitting on there as well. For all of us listening that are really inspired by collaboration between different sciences as well as ideas to impact healthcare. How does UH encourage this collaboration for its partners?
Well, we certainly know that we don't have all of the resources in-house to put an inventor, an innovator, or an innovation team in a position where they can be completely self-sufficient. And so we've created this bench, this cadre of support providers, entities that are like design companies, the balances, the smart shapes, entities that can help us with the development of outcomes and the building of prototypes and working models, organizations like Magnet or like Nottingham Spoke. And that's just to name a few, Tegan. There are a slew of these partners, both domestically from a city perspective, as well as around the state and around the country. But we're very aware of and sensitive to what it is that we can't or shouldn't do from a capabilities perspective, and are not shy then to lean on our partners, who then have an equal and appropriately aligned interest in coming along with us along the journey when it comes to giving an opportunity life and the impact that might have then on individuals and people. So there's always this sort of mission thread that runs through the manner in which we think about our partners, but certainly we're not afraid to infill and reach out where it is that we know we don't have the in-house capabilities.
Yes, it takes a village. And Rebecca has sent in another question. How would a new venture initiate a multi-site program between hospitals in the area like UH, Metro Health, and Cleveland Clinic after a successful pilot study?
Well, I think the timing is propitious, Rebecca. I think for a new technology to gain roots somewhere, you have to start with one institution. I think it's very difficult to come out of the gates in a multi-jurisdictional manner I think your initial traction requires a champion at a particular institution. And if the problem is a problem at large, the opportunity then for that champion to reach across the proverbial aisles to their partners, their domain experts and peers at the other institution to begin to consider what additional proof points or multi-institutional traction might look like. The Cleveland Innovation District is a live mechanism right now, candidly looking for those types of opportunities. And I've been in conversations with my counterparts at the other systems now for well over a year, looking for exactly that. What are the things that we could solve for together that would put us in a position where we are jointly responsible for a successful outcome? But in a more traditional sense, it would invariably usually take the outreach of an individual PI or researcher to their peers at another institution to think about and conjure what that multi-site type of opportunity might look like. But I would start with Rebecca. Might this work at one particular place, with the proviso up front that there is, of course, distinct interest in doing this in a multi-site setting.
Thanks, David, and thanks for all of the information you've shared throughout our conversation. I know there are those that are looking to learn more from you and about UH Ventures. And luckily, I think you're into podcasting. Am I right?
Absolutely. In fact, we recorded our 27th podcast Monday of this week, Tegan. It was actually to coincide with the end of Pride Month, and we're very fortunate to have a very impactful platform at UH focusing on our LGBTQ plus community and patient population. In fact, it's been so successful coming out of the ground in the last couple of years under Dr. Gupta's leadership that we're seeing tremendous interest from a number of states surrounding Ohio, one of the very few platforms of its type in the region. In fact, the only platform in a 5-state region doing some of the procedures that the platform offers. So an example of a very recent podcast that we hope some of you would listen to. But it's really a way for us to continue to build brand presence, Tegan. I mean, you're the pro when it comes to this as a topic, and unfortunately, you can only rest on your most recent laurels for a very short period of time before you become out of sight and out of mind. So we tend to continue to produce and develop conversation opportunities that are topical, that are very germane to an issue du jour. We look for the personalities that we can bring into the mix to facilitate the other end of that conversation. And we've had some interesting successes as a result. But again, Tegan, I'm telling you stuff that is your bread and butter when it comes to being the podcaster that you are.
No, podcasting is all about sharing information. And so thank you again for joining me in this conversation. I'll end with this last question and let Rick close us out. But in your opinion, what do communities need to heal?
I would say they need to start with intellectual honesty, I think, is what communities need to heal. The broader community needs to start with a very honest and more often than not painful self-assessment of why they're in the situation that they're in. We don't need to rewrite history, because candidly, history is rewritten all the time in the favor of those who are looking to fly the flag, so to speak. I think we have to be honest with why we got to the situation we're in. Not about blame, not about the notion of revisiting, but it helps us to heal if we can revisit, readdress, and then design for, to come full circle, solutions that will imply that history doesn't repeat itself. So let's start with some introspection and the addressing of some inconvenient truths that have put us in the position that we're in.
Thank you.
A great question to wrap up today. I want to thank everybody for joining us. A special thank you to David and to Tegan. This has been an excellent conversation, and thanks to all the questions who have come that have come up. If you have more questions, feel free to send them to us. We have some upcoming events that I wanted to just talk about really quickly. I think they are on the next slide. There they are. And my marketing folks would be upset if I didn't say, this is all going to be recorded, has been recorded, and will be posted on YouTube. You can follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram, and some of the other programs that we have going on right now. We are very excited to be hosting in Midtown a new neighborhood career hotline for anyone that is looking for job training across any industry. Has been launched in partnership with Towards Employment, as well as food trucks are back in Midtown every Tuesday. We've been having a lot of great lunches out at Colonel Young Park at 46th and Prospect. And then, so every Tuesday, don't forget about the food trucks. And then lastly, we are wrapping up a real estate series designed as more of a community conversation to understand some of the basic fundamentals of real estate. The last session is going to be talking a little bit about financing and different types of how developers look at the financial risk involved in real estate. So again, thank you everyone for joining. We will be in touch with our next event, which is going to be in person in July, with all the details, hopefully by the end of the month. And again, special thanks to David Sylvan and to Tegan Horton for today's session.
Thank you for having me.